All right, hello all. Welcome to our Tips and Techniques webinar, backed by popular demand. So a lot to cover today, so let's just dive right in with today's agenda. So first off, Eric Smith is going to walk us through the many dashboards available today within Tidal. We'll discuss how customers are currently using them, how you can set them up, etc. Then Fred Lensing will take us through SLA management, both what's new in the Tidal automation solution, as well as the Explorer product and how that can help in this area as well. Then John Laird is going to go through a new functionality within Tidal, the Terminator jobs, and how and why you may want to begin using these. I'll spend a few minutes on news highlights, some of our upcoming events, etc., and then we'll spend the remaining time on Q&A. So speaking of Q&A, let's talk about a little bit of housekeeping. All participants are going to be in listen-only mode. As always, we do record this session and we'll post it on the portal early next week under the webinar section. You can submit questions using the WebEx Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. And with the time that we have left at the end, we'll answer as many as possible. And if there's some that we don't get to, we will answer those and post those on the portal as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Smith, who is going to take us through dashboards. Eric?
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. So this morning, as Rick said, I'm going to be going over the dashboards and giving a demonstration of some of the new features and enhancements that we have recently added to those dashboard views. So just a quick recap on dashboards. As you can see, the dashboard was originally added back in version 6.5.6, and it has since been updated based off of your suggestions. Our goal with the dashboards is to essentially continuously improve on the user experience by allowing users and stakeholders to quickly see the information that's important to them, while at the same time giving those users the options to control things like the graphical type, what data is being displayed, and then being able to see that data in real time. So let's take a look at some of the new features that we've added. So first off, the new refactor color selection. Initially, when the dashboards were created, you were locked into a particular set of colors that was designated by our dev team. Now, however, the colors for the views are actually pulled from the color selection palette from the job activity grid. So those colors will actually now match up with what you see in the job activity window. We can see here on my screen that we've highlighted waiting on dependencies and that nice bright lime green, waiting on operators in fuchsia, and so forth and so on. Moving on, we added the data behind the chart option. This tab will show the data that's populating the information for that graph or chart. So this is a nice option if someone wanted to see the specific data and that they don't have to navigate away from the dashboard to review that information. They can simply click on that tab and see all of those jobs that are populating within a particular status. You'll notice on my screen that currently the status is reflected as the code within the database itself, but we hope to have a change here shortly where we'll actually have the associated alpha characters associated with those particular status. So you'll see completed normally, completed abnormally, error occurred, and so forth and so on. Moving on, another requested feature that's been added is the option to graph multiple points of data in a pivot table. So for this, we added a new element type called flexible visualization. Along with this new data type comes a new set of variables, the X and Y axis, the pivot point, and then the pivot operation. The pivot operation is going to contain fields such as your average, your count, median, mode, sum, and these options are going to determine what operation will be performed on the data from the selected columns. As you can see on the example here in my demonstration, we have the date as the x-axis, y is the status, and then the duration and sum. And if we go forward, we can actually see that for a particular date, we had 112,960 total minutes that were completed that were shown in a completed normal status. So we can actually get a sum value of that information that you're looking at based off of those values. Building on those additional visualization options that we have recently introduced, such as the graphs and charts, users can now select the graphical view option when graphing data from the job activity console. These graphical options will support PERT, Gantt, and the status board views. And this option allows you, again, to have the options for displaying the data that's important to you in a way that's easily understandable. So again, if you are someone that likes to utilize the PERT and Gantt charts, this is going to be your option. And then the last option that I wanted to highlight is the ability to allow users to create their own dashboard pages. So this is a helpful feature when you may have many different users or groups that want to see separate data. So instead of multiple dashboard elements on one page, users can actually create their own dashboard pages and then determine what dashboard elements are going to populate on that page. So now just a quick recap of some of the features that you might not be familiar with, starting with accessing the dashboards. There are two ways that you can do this, one by accessing the dashboard directly from the Client Manager's UI under the Operations header. The other more direct way would be to access the dashboard only option. And to do this, once the user's logged in, select the dotted grid in the upper left-hand corner, and then select Default Dashboard. What this is going to do, it's going to load up a dashboard only view option where the user would have the ability to see the data and just the data that's reflected from the dashboard. They won't have to go through anything else. Another quick point here, alternatively, you can actually update your URL from client to dashboard, and this will drop you directly to the dashboard view. I want to point that out because it might be helpful if you have someone from your management team that's looking to gain access to that dashboard functionality. Providing them with that direct link is going to save them the trouble of having to navigate the application themselves. And then two final points that I did want to make. As with much of the application, there are security policies that can be leveraged to control who has access to what levels when accessing the dashboards. You know, perhaps you want users to be able to view the dashboards but not create new elements. So with those customizable security policies, you can provide only the access that your users need for that particular role. And while Tidal does come preloaded with a handful of sample dashboards, users with the appropriate security privileges can create or even modify existing elements to show the relevant data that's being required by your organization. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the demo. All right, so first off, I wanted to just kind of do a brief recap of the access. Here is in the upper left-hand corner of my Client Manager's UI, you can actually see the grid that I was mentioning before. There are two ways of accessing the dashboard applications under Operations and then highlighting Dashboards, or alternatively, you can actually click on that grid, select Default Dashboard, and it'll take you to a dashboard-only view. You won't have to deal with any of the operations, the definitions, administration aspect. Again, this is kind of good for users that may just want to see their relevant data and only this. If you notice up in my web browser's address window, we've actually changed client to dashboard, so you could give a user direct access to this if they wanted to see nothing but this. Switching back to my UI, I'll scroll down a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the secured policies. Again, if I navigate down to my security policy, you can see that we do have a dashboard access only view. In this particular scenario, I've created a customized security policy assigned the view functionality to everything with the exception of the dashboard view, which does have the capabilities of adding, editing, deleting, and viewing that data. And then to create or even see some of the pre-existing samples that we have of our dashboards, you would just click on the dashboard element. And this is where, again, if that user has the appropriate security privileges, they would be able to modify, edit, create, copy their those dashboard elements. So going back up to our dashboards, let's take a look at that. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is the refactor color selection. You'll notice here, utilizing today's jobs pie chart as our example, you know, we've got waiting on dependencies, waiting on operator, held, waiting on group. All of these are are gray and kind of indistinct from the rest of the grid. So let's go ahead and break that up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here to job activity, and I've created a sample group. We can see waiting on operator, dependencies scheduled. Well, actually, waiting on operator and dependencies are highlighted in gray here. So what I want to do is I want to break that up a little bit. So I'm going to right-click on job activity and select preferences. From here, you can see that I've got column status color and grid background color. What I want to do is I want to select status color. And then from here, you'll see that for each particular status, I can actually change the default color patterns for these, okay? So I'm going to select waiting on dependencies. I'm going to make that a nice fuchsia color. I'm going to do my waiting on operator. Let's do that lime. Let's do waiting on children. We're going to do that in a nice gold color. I'll hit OK. And we'll see this the changes reflected here on our job activity. Let's go to our dashboard. And now we can actually see that we've got some additional colors in here that we can kind of quickly highlight and isolate. Here's our waiting on operator in 15 in that bright lime color. Fuchsia is showing waiting on dependencies 16. So we can actually reflect the data that's actually being pulled in from the job activity. Clicking over to my May demo dashboard, let's talk a little bit about the pivot table. So in this particular example, I'm actually doing something a little different. The scenario that I'm running with this is if somebody wanted to see how many times a particular job that completed abnormally was forced to rerun for whatever scenario, and what the total number value is. So you can see that I've got my x-axis is a date, the y-axis is status, my pivot point is actually reruns, or how many times that job was set to rerun, and then the pivot operation is I want to sum up all of that data. So by selecting those tables, I can actually load this up. And I can see here that 103, which is completed abnormally, actually has been rerun 21 times. So for this particular day, I have 21 jobs that completed in a completed abnormal status, a total of 21 times. So again, it gives you the capabilities of kind of graphing out the information that's specific to whatever kind of use case scenario you may encounter. Moving on from there, let's talk a little bit about the graphical views. I actually set this up as my May demo graph, the jobs from my job activity window before. So again, I'm just going to highlight the jobs that I'd actually like to graph out, scroll all the way down to my job group. And then for this particular scenario, I'm going to go ahead and do the Gantt chart. So I just have to click on Load View. And you can see that the information now is presented in a Gantt chart view. If I wanted to actually change this, I could do something like PERT or status board and then load up that diagram. And again, all this data is customizable. So if I wanted to see it for a different group or different range, I could actually modify that as well. And then finally, in the case of being able to modify or add your own dashboard pages. So on occasion, you might come to a dashboard that might look something like this, where we've got a number of different dashboard elements on one page. It might be a little busy. It might be showing a lot of information for people to digest. So what you can actually do is you can actually select the Add function up here in the upper right-hand corner. You'll be asked to enter in a dashboard name. So we'll do something like demo dashboard. We'll hit save. And now I've actually added a new demo dashboard page. And at this point, you can just populate that demo page with whatever dashboard elements you'd like to add to your particular view. So that'll go ahead and conclude my presentation for the dashboard, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Fred.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. Fred, I am passing you the ball now.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Rick. Looks like I am displaying my SLA management page. So let's take a look at a couple slides before we hit the demo. So SLA management has been around for a long time in Tidal. The origins are events that you might have already encountered in setting up event actions. So Tidal automation been capable of providing predictive, or maybe you might call it proactive SLA management for decades, and that's done via events. And so what we see over on the right is an example of some of those event triggers that you could consider to be proactive or predictive. Notice the word might. A job might not be ready by the end of its time window. A job might start later than expected. So the idea here is that with SLA management, you don't want any surprises. You want to be able to be given a heads up in advance, before a problem is going to occur that can't be, facilitated, that can't be remediated. Other examples include a job might run into an outage window. A job might run past the end of its time window. You can imagine that if I have a service level agreement where I need to have something done by a particular time, another word might be deadline. Imagine if someone put a job on hold. That could affect whether or not your business process is going to complete on time. Or maybe a job ran shorter than its minimum time. I'm going to meet the SLA, but I might want to know that it ran shorter than minimum time because maybe the accuracy of the data is now going to be in question. So as always, any event trigger can trigger multiple actions, and these include mostly notifications with dynamically resolvable variables, but it can also be job insertions. It can even be opening up tickets to help desks, ticketing systems, or for example, via our ServiceNow adapter. So what kind of enhancements do we have to offer? TA now has refined and enhanced SLA framework. We're going to discover two new terms. They're going to be a risk window and a breach window. The risk window and the breach window are now going to appear in all of your job definitions, all of your group definitions, and that's one way that you're going to be able to implement an SLA, is that on per job group basis. Alternatively, that second bullet, there's also a risk and breach window within calendar-based system-wide SLA policies, and those can be specifically viewed from a tag-based SLA console. And so we'll be taking a look at that. At the bottom there, third bullet, 6.5.9 and above. That's the version that's going to be best suited for your SLA management with the new SLA status column in the job activity. And we can see that on the right. You have the breach status. You may be at risk, you may be in risk, you may be in breach, and those are going to be dynamically changing, as the jobs progress through their sequence. A way to visualize this, shown up here, you might think that's a job definition. Looks familiar, right? Calendar, start window, risk window, breach window, those you might not be familiar with, but that's actually a SLA policy. So you're familiar with the start window. You may not be familiar with the risk window and the breach window, but those are familiar terrain for you in terms of a job definition. Now we'll be able to not only create an SLA with a risk window and a breach window in any job or group, but we have a new construct that's known as an SLA policy. You kind of get the idea here from the graphic along the bottom. We have a start window. Job must start between this time, start and end job window. Then it's going to be at risk in this window, and it's going to be in breach in this window. And remember, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be triggering events and taking actions as a result of that. Onwards to the demo. What we're looking at is definitions. I have saved a view using tags, and tags play into our SLA console. We're going to be visiting job activity, business activity, SLA activity. I'm using tags to refine my view under definitions. That saved view is also available under job activity, same type of affair. What we're looking at is a typical process that we've really vetted amongst many of our customers, many of our verticals. There's a certain commonality associated with setting up SLAs on processing data. So in this regard, I have a master report processing. Maybe that's manufacturing report processing. Maybe that's master retail processing, right? In all cases, there's a typical approach pattern where I might have some internal data that I need to provide for processing. Maybe it's corporate type data. I might have some geographic data that needs to be in the mix. Those might be provided internally. Then I might have to provide data from an external source. And what we want to do is make sure that this runs, on time in a secure fashion. It doesn't really matter, what your vertical is. In manufacturing, the data involved might have something to do with work orders. In retail, it might have something to do with point of sale receipts. Pharma could be clinical trial lab results. Insurance or healthcare could be claims. Banking or finance could be regulatory compliance. Worst case, lack of disseminating the work orders to their proper destination could leave an assembly line idle. Point of sale receipts, if they're not calculated properly, could misrepresent quarter sales. Let's say I wasn't able to get my clinical trial lab results into the FDA on time. Maybe that resulted in me not getting a drug approved, which could be millions of dollars at stake. Maybe there was claims, hundreds or thousands of claims that didn't get paid today. that disrupts, your customers' loyalty and trust in you. Or maybe you didn't, in banking and finance, regulatory compliance, you didn't get an SEC filing in on time. And as a result, you were given a fine. We've had customers that just on the basis of fines alone, they were able to justify the purchase of a workload automation tool. So processing in any case, in any industry, in any vertical is going to need to be done in a timely, accurate, and secure manner, all of which Tidal can ensure. Back to just the general approach pattern, data internal, data arriving externally, right? That could be a put, that could from an external source to us, that could be a get from us to an external source. But typically, once that data arrives, there's going to be some sort of validation, data quality scrubbing, validation, deduplication, accuracy checks, etc. At that point, the data spreads out, and I'm just going to call it application co-processing in general. That data, again, could be a combination from different sources, right? Inbound data may interact with any number of different applications. Those applications, may be accepting that data as input. They may be adding to that data as output, may be a combination of both. But in general, it spreads out. This could actually be hundreds of jobs. Maybe there's a ETL process and a data warehouse involved with Informatica. Maybe there's a on-premise ERP, the manufacturing module of Oracle apps, Oracle EBS. Maybe there's a specialized cloud app for your particular vertical for manufacturing or clinical data. As we go through, that data eventually reconverges into some, merged results. Another example of this would be, imagine if we're doing this all in the cloud, same kind of premise. I'm getting data. In this case, I'm putting on-premise data in the cloud. Similarly, right, there's any number of different ways that I might process that data. It might be via a Linux box, a Windows box, a serverless, database, maybe some Lambda functions in AWS, maybe an SSH call to a server, all the similar approach pattern. Eventually, the data reconverges, and at that point, it's going to have to go in a couple different directions. It might need to be in one format to be externally delivered to partners, for example. It may need to be delivered internally in nice, refined, reports that can be drilled down into. This particular process has two dependencies. Not that I don't think I pointed this out in particular, but that process, that third process, that master report processing, isn't going to run until the Prep 1 and Prep 2 groups have run. Now notice in particular the calendar column. Here I'm using the out-of-the-box daily calendar. If we take a look at the schedule tab, you'll see that, yep, there's my time window, but I have the addition of the SLA window with the risk window and the breach window. And I'm assigning the SLA for this group in the SLA window area. Same for Prep 2. Now take a look at the calendar for this process. We're going to be taking a look at the alternate way to set up SLAs, and that's with a policy that starts with a calendar. So I made a copy of the daily calendar. I called it MRP Daily. I then went down under definitions and I said, I'm going to use that policy or use that calendar to make a new system-wide policy. And in that policy, I specify the calendar. So you can kind of imagine here, so any job that's going to be associated with this calendar is going to be associated with this SLA that I've set up. Leading and trailing time window, leading and trailing risk window, leading and trailing breach window. Additionally, we've assigned a tag associated with all of these jobs, including the ones that have the SLAs as at the group level and the ones that have the SLA at the policy level. So once we've set these jobs up, they're going to be run typically by calendar, but there could be some event-based action in here as well. Maybe the arrival of a file is required to get master report processing to occur. When we set up those windows, those are events. So let's take a quick look at both job events, the standards that have been around for a long time, completed normally, abnormally. Some of the more proactive ones, might not be ready by the end of a time window, might start later than expected. But on down near the end, take a look at the ones that start with the SLA prefix. Job may complete within the risk window. Job may not complete by the end of the risk window. Now, you'll be the one deciding, which ones to use. So there's a lot of flexibility here. You're not necessarily going to be imposing all of these SLAs on every single job. You may have, different jobs that you want to be notified in different cases. We also have system events. And so you'll notice that I preface those with sys just so I can make a differentiation. These are the ones that are going to be triggered by the system SLAs. In both cases, I'm doing actions, and those actions in particular, we'll take a look at alerts. So for a typical job-based SLA action, I'm just saying that this event triggered this action, right? And I'm using my variables that are available to me to do that. For the system alert, went a little further. I took the information, some newly available information, right? Risk from time, risk until time, breach from time, breach until time. So let's see how those manifest themselves. We take a look at the alert console, and we can see that some of these have been triggered. Some of them have the SLA, so you can kind of get an idea. Those are some of the ones that I brought from jobs where the SLA was configured within the job, and some of those, and those are examples down here. Other ones came from the system-wide policies that were associated with jobs. And if we take a look, you can kind of see the resolved result. I said with a job-based one, I'm just getting the name of the event and the name of the action. Here we can see all the data. Got a little carried away there, but you can see the risk from until time, the breach from and until time. So not only can we capable of sending SLA information in terms of notifications, remember those notifications could include emails, alerts, S&MP traps, logs, call any help desk or ticketing system, or even call ServiceNow. Because you have to think about the fact that the SLAs within Tidal might actually be part of a larger construct of SLAs. We can contribute to that. Here's an example in ServiceNow where I have an incident open in ServiceNow, and you can see that I was able to populate the information in the work notes. Again, you can imagine I used a variable here. I had the triggering event equaled such and such a variable. That was the name of the variable event. Back to here. Let's take a look at our job activity. And in particular, we're going to look at our sequence of events. Notice that our first prep job, it was in risk. It had a duration that passed the risk window, but didn't go into the breach window. Prep 2, you can see the difference here, was in breach. This guy, dependencies have been met, but let's imagine someone has held that job, right? That might interfere with my SLA. If we were to go back and look, we'd find out that I'm still okay, or hopefully I'm still okay in regard to running this job. I'm going to take a bet that I can get it done before without getting into a risk window or a breach window. And along those lines, let's take a look and see. Before we do that, we'll come in here. We'll look at the job definition. We'll look at, are there any particular job events? And if you're familiar with events within a job definition, where we drilled down and looked at the job definition, I do have one event that applies to all jobs. Any job that's not going to complete by the end of the risk window, that's going to trigger an event. This one, I added more than you may actually use. just for the sakes of demonstration. But I do have, all of these, one way or the other, might get triggered. And my event name, and you can see that I use the same name for the event, the trigger, as I did for the event name. So I created event triggers that are going to create alerts, and these are the events that will trigger those alerts. Let's release this job, let it start running, see how it does. And it's going to go rather quickly through a number of these jobs. As it does so, let's take a look at some of the notes that we have available to us in the context-sensitive help. I've actually used that in my run book. So if we were to look closely at this, somewhere in here it says help, right? I use that to populate my run book. And keep an eye on the red dotted line. We're not going to go through all the verbiage here, but you can see that there's going to be an explanation here about, when you might get a job may complete within a risk window. Times moving forward. The job may not complete by the end of the risk window. The easier way to look at this without getting into the weeds is that as time marches on, I've got my job start and finish window. Moving forward, I miss my start window. I get into my risk window. Get into my breach window. And we have, triggering events all along the way. The old school ones, job might not be ready by end of time window, and the newer ones that are prefixed with the SLA. And so this is easily found under this topic. You could probably just go to your help and, basically search for SLA. Back to our view here. We're already running the last job. If I've timed this correctly, it may go into at risk. It may go into breach. Remember, though, that as you look at the data, it doesn't have to be in this format. It can be done in a graphical view. Right, there's my dependencies, prep 1, prep 2, my master report processing, my data ingestion and its jobs, my application co-processing and its jobs. Notice that the merge results are dependent upon all three of those different applications completing normally. And then our data disposition, where we do external delivery of the jobs to maybe a client in one format, internal distribution in another format. Other forms include the ability to select, for example, here I'm selecting these two together, and I'm looking at both of them in a PERT view, right? Here's my prep 1, my prep 2, and their three jobs. I can add a successor. That's going to be what? My master report processing with a variable dependency. I can additionally add my job group children. And if so desired, add the job group children for the one that's currently running. We're still about halfway through. We may be hitting a risk window. We may be hitting a breach window. To check that, we can go into our business activity and our SLA activity. And again, 6.5.9. Right? That's where I'm going to be able to see my SLA status column. That's going to be available not only in my SLA activity. And by the way, as far as I can tell, this is for my system-wide policies. But that SLA status window is not only available under the SLA status view, it's also available in the business view. All right, also available in the job activity view. And so depending upon who you are, you may or may not have access to all those different views. You may just be concerned as a business user on one particular tag that gives you the focus on your jobs. Looks like we're at risk. As a result, we have created an alert, and I'm not sure if it's made it there yet, but we'll trust that we've triggered the appropriate alert, and I'm looking forward to come. But I think at that point, you've got the general idea, and I am now going to complete this and pass it on. So bear with me one second. And I will stop sharing.
Excellent. Thank you, Fred. We will now pass it over to John, who will talk about Terminator jobs. John?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot. Let's see if I can share here. Okay. So we will talk about new functionality that everybody can see this, hopefully. We'll talk about the new Terminator jobs, right? So this was added in 6.5.10, long awaited. With this Terminator jobs, we added a new job type, right, called Terminator jobs. So now you'll have Terminator jobs from the job definitions where you can add. And along with this, you get the job statuses terminating and terminated. Those are going to be new job statuses that you may not be familiar with yet. We added that with terminating jobs. So what are Terminator jobs, right? So basically, Terminator jobs allow you to actually end the group at a certain point, you know, based off outcomes of other jobs happening. You can call a Terminator job, and what that Terminator job will do will terminate the group right then and there, right? And all the other remaining jobs in that group will actually become terminated, right? So that's the new status, terminated. So you can actually prematurely end the group, right? And at the same time, when you call these Terminator jobs, you get the ability to also set the group status when you terminate, right? So you can set it to various status, and we'll take a look at that here in a second, such as completed normally, completed abnormally, and what have you. So that's Terminator jobs, right? So that's a new job type. But also with the Terminator functionality, all jobs can actually do a termination, right? So in the job options we've added where we can actually allow a job to terminate a group based off certain job statuses. So what may give you a reason to use these particular jobs? You might want to control your group a little bit more, right? I've heard from a lot of customers in support, right? They call in, you know, why did my group kind of complete this way, right? I wanted to complete this way. So right now, without Terminator jobs, your group's going to take on the worst case status, right? If something completes abnormally, the group's going to become completed abnormally. Now with Terminator jobs, even though something completes abnormally, I can actually complete the group normally, right? So gives you a little more flexibility with controlling that group and its group statuses for downstream job dependencies and what have you. Also, a few other reasons why you want to maybe use Terminator jobs, right? Maybe you want to reduce your workflow, right? So you don't have a lot of overhead. Maybe you have some jobs that may not necessarily need to run based off of outcomes, right? So if something happens, certain jobs hit certain statuses, maybe other jobs don't need to run. So it gives you a little more flexibility in controlling that workflow. And then, you know, you can end that group a lot faster and allow your downstream jobs to run a little ahead of time, right? Such as if you're under SLAs and what have you that we just discussed, right? So you meet those SLAs a little quicker. And also, if we are able to, you know, kind of eliminate some environment overhead, if we don't necessarily need to run the jobs, you won't have those jobs out there sitting there waiting forever, maybe carrying over to the next day and that kind of stuff. If they don't need to run, we can actually just terminate from that point and move on, because, you know, a terminated status would be a final status for jobs and groups. So let me show you quickly on what a terminator job definition looks like. It's pretty basic here, right? So keep in mind, primarily is going to be the the dependencies on the terminator. When is this terminator running? So once the dependencies are met, it's going to execute, and you really only get one tab, the terminator tab, to tell it what to do, right, to the group. What status do we want to put the group in? And as you can see here, we got multiple statuses that we could set the group to once the terminator job has ran. You can complete it abnormally, you can complete it normally. So the dependency is going to be key where you set that up. And once that's met, the terminator job kicks in and then can terminate the group. So those are job terminators, but all jobs can actually do a termination, right? So keep that in mind. In the job definitions and the group definitions and the options tab, we now have new options where you can actually terminate based off of a few statuses, such as error occurred, completed abnormally, or aborted, right? So if your job goes into one of those statuses, he can actually terminate at that point. They also have options in all the jobs. How do you want to handle termination if you do get a request to terminate, right? Maybe another job said, hey, group, terminate, and it sends it down, and my job's sitting there waiting to run, and he gets the termination request. What do I want to do with that, right? Do I want to ignore it? Do I want to abort the job if it's currently running? You have that capability and flexibility within the job definition to set that, so you get the outcome that you desire here. So this is looking at a normal job definition and those options, right? So you can see I have it outlined here. There's a few different statuses that we can select to terminate the parent on these particular statuses. So if you had those checked off, it would do the termination if the job itself went into those particular selected statuses, right? If it went to abort, we would terminate the parent and move on at that point, right? So the parent would actually become ended. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when the jobs actually terminate, they can't send the status like a terminator job can. It's just going to terminate the group. So when this happens, the group's going to take on the status of the worst case, kind of like what we do today, worst case status of the jobs in the group, right? And the remaining jobs will get terminated, right? So terminated is going to be one of those status, such as others, that we kind of do not look at to determine the status. So we're looking at all the other statuses, such as completed abnormally, aborted, and things like that to determine the group status at that point. So we won't be able to set the group status within all jobs. You need a terminator job to do that, but all jobs can actually terminate. Just want to make sure you understand that. Now, on the job, you can see we also have options to how do we want to handle the terminator request, right? We can either ignore it, we can abort it if it's active. So if my job gets a termination request, I can set it up to ignore that request and still allow my job to run. So the group will have to wait for my job to finish if I have ignore on here. And we'll take a look at some of these different scenarios here in a second and give you a good idea of how things play out. But now the abort if active, you can see that particular option is for jobs. With groups, everything's the same, right? You can terminate the parent based off of certain statuses. So now we're going multiple levels, right, to a workflow. So if a parent gets a termination request or he goes to completed abnormally, I can actually terminate its parent. So the grandparent can actually get terminated just as well, right? And you can see the difference on how to handle the terminate request. Down the bottom, it says terminate parent, right? We don't have abort if active for groups. This is the group definition, right? So groups are never active. They only take on the status of their children, right? So he's not like he's a job. So you won't have the abort if active because groups really don't abort, the jobs abort. So let me show you real quick. Let's see here. A second. Show you this. First and foremost, I wanted to show you where you can find the Terminator jobs, right? So if I do an add job, as you can see, we now have a new job type here, Terminator job. And if we look at that, it's the same thing, right? So basically, you get the list of statuses of how you want to terminate the group, right? So I got a few different scenarios that I wanted to briefly show you guys that we discussed. This first scenario is going to just simply terminate the group. So all of these little scenarios, they'll have a few jobs in it. Job 2 will complete abnormally and kind of drive the termination, just to give you a heads up, right? So let's look at job 2. This is going to run and complete abnormally. And you can see the options are in here, terminate parent, right? So when this completes abnormally, this terminator job is going to kick in, right? So we can see that the dependency is on job 2. Once it completes abnormally, he's going to run. And what is he going to see? He's going to set the group to complete it abnormally based off of running. So let me insert this group into the schedule and let's watch it play through here. Be real quick. Job runs is running. You can see that? Okay. And it completed. Job 2 will run and he'll complete abnormally and therefore terminate the group at that point. Job 3 will go to terminate it. See how that played out? Job 3 didn't get the opportunity to run. We went ahead and completed the group. The next demo I want to show you is going to be not only terminating the group, but also being able to set the status as we discussed, right? So maybe something completed abnormally, but in the old Tidal ways, right, in a normal scenario, we would just complete the group abnormally, right? Now I have the capability of saying, even though this job completed abnormally, I am going to set the group to complete it normally. So I have a little more control on the group status here. If you look at the dependency, I have 2 dependencies, job 1 completing normally, job 2 completing abnormally. So if these 2 scenarios occur, my terminator job will run and he'll set the group to complete it normally. So let's insert this into the schedule and see how this runs. Got it out here running. We can collapse that. So we can look at this one. So job 1 completed normally. That was one of our dependencies. The second dependency for the termination is job 2 completing abnormally, right? So that'll call the job terminator. And you can see now the job 3 got terminated, but look at the group. The group is completed normally, even though we have a job that completed abnormally. Very, very powerful here, right? In the past, this wasn't easy to do. You could probably accomplish, the group going completed normally, but that was after the fact of it going completed abnormally and maybe manually setting the status to completing normally, right? This never did go to completed abnormally. It went straight to completed normally at the group level. So that's basically showing you what you could do with the terminator job, right? And of course, there could be a little more complicated scenarios where you can actually terminate the parent's parent and so forth and so on, multiple levels deep. But I also wanted to show you real quick terminating with the job option. So there's no terminator job in here. These are just regular jobs, right? And I have job 2, once again, set up to complete normally here. And we can see on his options, when he does do an abnormal completion, he's going to terminate, right? So we don't necessarily need a terminator job to do these terminations. So if I insert this group the way this job's set up and defined, once job 2 completes abnormally, he's going to terminate the group. And again, we can't set the group status, so the group's going to be just like Tidal is, right? It's going to take on the worst status of what's in its children at that point. And that would be completed abnormally because our job 2 completed abnormally. And job 3 is a terminated status. Again, it's not really looked at to determine the status. It's one of those statuses where it doesn't really decide on the group status. But the completed abnormally would be the worst status in this group. So that's why our group went to completed abnormally. I just wanted to quickly show you guys that you can actually terminate the group without even having a terminator job. All jobs have that powerful capability now. The last one is we're setting a configuration option on the job to complete abnormal, right? So he's going to actually terminate. And remember, in the past, job 3 got terminated, right? So in this scenario, I wanted to show you that I can actually ignore that termination request with job 3. In the past, we've seen it just get terminated. In this case, I'm saying, oh, no way. I don't want you to terminate me. Ignore that request. Allow me to run, right? So let's look at this one real quick. So job 1 will complete normally. Job 2 is going to complete abnormally and send the termination to the group, which in turn tries to terminate the job 3, but he actually does not get terminated because he's set to ignore. This is where you see that terminating status that I referred to earlier, right? That new status terminating. This is the group you'll see go to terminating when he's waiting on other jobs to actually finish that may be set to ignore, like in this case, right? So we're still going to allow job 3 to actually complete, but you can see that the group actually got a termination request still. Since this job 3 was really waiting on job 2 to complete normally, I wanted to show you the termination. I'm just going to override this, allow the job to complete, and then you'll see the group go from terminating to actual being able to terminate now that job 3 actually had the capability to run, and he's going to get that status of, you know, job 2 being completed abnormally. He's going to get abnormally the worst status, right? So that is basically looking at not only terminator jobs, right, but also all jobs can actually have a play in the termination. That's all I have for you guys. So Rick, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, John. Let me take back the presenter rights here and share my screen. There we go. All right. So a few pieces of news. We've got a number of upcoming events here that I just wanted to make everybody aware of. First off, we've got a booth at the Blueprint 4D show in Las Vegas here in a couple weeks. So it's June 6th through the 9th. This show is the Oracle application show. So all of you with, JD Edwards, Oracle eBusiness, PeopleSoft, Oracle Cloud ERP, et cetera, that may be attending, swing by our booth. Our booth is number 625. Or even better, if you are going to be attending, feel free to reach out to me. Maybe we can schedule a time for lunch or breakfast or a post-show drink or something along those lines. So let me know. Also, we're going to have a booth at the Hot 2022 show, which is the Workload Automation Fair in Munich, Germany. This is in July, so July 5th and 6th. I don't have our booth number yet. Stay tuned. We will get that. But once again, if you plan to attend, please let us know, and we'll plan to do a meetup and get together then. We are in the process of planning our 2022 user group meetings. We've reached out to a number of you, and actually based on the feedback, I think, it appears that a lot of people really aren't comfortable, with large groups meeting in person. So I think at least initially, we're going to remain virtual for a number of these meetings. So the first one that we have scheduled is June 21st. It's going to be for the New York and New Jersey folks. It's going to be, once again, a virtual event. The next two after that I think we have on track are New England as well as the South and Southeast regions. We are looking to do more, right? So we're going to be doing them all across North America at least. And so stay tuned. And some of them probably will be in person if that's what people want to do. But, they will be coming. So stay tuned for information on all of this. One of the new activities that our pre-sales engineers are engaged in is creating short demo videos of some of our newer adapters and components and features. The first video that was just completed by Eric Smith highlights our Apache Airflow adapter. So it's quite excellent. They're short videos, right? So they're not really lengthy. I think most of them are probably around 5 minutes in duration. They are posted on the customer portal. So this is the first one. So feel free to go and check it out. We have a number of others that are in the works. So I think our next three planned are, our SAP adapters, ServiceNow, and our AWS cloud adapters. But if there are others that you'd like to see, let us know. We'll get them in the queue. It's something that we intend to keep doing throughout, this year and probably into the future. So just so you know. We will be having a Q2 sales promotion. So I want to make everybody aware of that. Actually starts today. So the promotion, we will be offering a 45% discount on all of our command and control adapters, and it'll run through the end of June, right? So all of our cloud adapters, AWS, S3, Azure Blob, our Kubernetes adapter, ServiceNow, VMware, the SAP Solution Manager adapter that's new. So all of those, if you were interested in seeing a demo of any of these or getting a quote, please reach out to your account manager and they can take care of you with that. We are in the final stages and getting ready to launch a new brand for Tidal. So this is going to include a new website for us, along with a number of other things. It is coming up on June 6th, so keep your eye out for that. And lastly, save the date for our next webinar. It's going to be July 28th. We're going to highlight our summer launch, our summer 2022 launch. Tom O'Rourke will join us and share that data for us. And with that, I think that I probably don't have a whole lot of time for Q&A. Let me see here. Bear with me and let me see what we have. Okay, 2 minutes. So I'm going to be very quick and ask whatever questions I can. And then the rest of them will have to get answered and on the website. So first one, to dashboards. Can dashboard functionality be disabled for A, all users, or B, for select users?
Not at this particular time, without the exception of having to create a security policy reflected around that. And in that particular scenario, they don't necessarily lose access to that grid button in the upper left-hand corner. Basically, if they don't have the permission to view the dashboard, they won't be able to actually navigate to the dashboard or create any of the dashboard elements.
Okay. Let's see. Is there an option at global system level to alert or send an email when any job is running for more than X minutes? Apart from the maximum time setting at job level, is there some system event that can be set up globally for all the jobs? Anyone? Fred? Crickets? Anyone? All right, let's move on to the next one. Fred, these are SLA ones, so do we need to create SLA policy always for the SLA setup? Hello, is Fred there? All right. Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know if Fred somehow has an issue. So,
Yeah, I
don't know if you know
I
the
see him
answer.
muted within the chat, but
Okay. I don't know if you know the answers to any of these. Do we need to create an SLA policy always for the SLA setup?
So there's two ways of going about it. There's the SLA policy that's a global functionality, which is associated with the calendar, and then there's the SLA policy that actually exists at the individual job level, kind of similar to the Terminator functionality. But yeah, if you wanted an SLA policy for the entire organization for every single job that's applied, create the SLA policy and then assign it to the calendar, and the calendar would be associated with that. Otherwise, do it at the individual job level and track your critical path from there.
Okay, and then one more. There's a whole bunch of questions here, but just to follow up to that one. Can you get an email if there's an SLA alert as well?
Yes, all the actions are available for SLA policies. So that could be a ServiceNow incident, that could be an email action notification, that could be the inserting of a job to remediate a previously, identified issue. It could be opening up a ServiceNow incident, whatever it may be. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, so we have a number of other jobs, or a number of other questions here. So we'll have to get to these. We'll answer them, as I mentioned, posted them on a portal. I appreciate everybody's time today. We're running a little bit over here, so I will let everyone go. But thank you once again, and have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.